In Stalingrad, in the winter of 1942, hell was not made of fire. It was made of ice. A white hell where the temperature tore at the flesh and hope froze along with the Volga. Millions of men faced each other in the most brutal battle in history, reduced to rats in frozen rubble. But in the midst of this terror, there was a man with an oath that forbade him from raising a weapon. This is Dr. Dimitri Volkov, not a combatant but a field doctor of the Red Army. And his story is not about how many lives he took, but about how many he refused to let die. An improbable hero, whose only weapon was a bandage and a syringe. His faith in humanity was the only thing that did not freeze. Today we will dive into Dimitri's combat protocol, the Hippocratic Oath, how a man under crossfire refused to kill and, paradoxically, became a legend of courage and sacrifice. We will reveal the story that the Soviet government itself tried to erase, for it contained an inconvenient truth, a dangerous thesis. The line between enemy and brother can be as thin as a film of ice. Pain, he used to say, knows no flags. The question is, in a war where everyone fought to kill, what happens when you fight to save? Prepare to meet the doctor of Stalingrad. The story begins on the night he had to make a terrible choice: fulfill his mission or save an enemy. December 1942. The cold was the second enemy, and the shortage of supplies the third. Dimitri Volkov was not a coward. He was an idealist. Trained in medicine in Leningrad, he believed that his vocation was above any political or military ideology. He enlisted as a doctor, a respected position, but with one strict rule: he would never pick up a weapon. This stance created constant tension with his superior, Major Krylov, who saw this belief as a luxury that Stalingrad could not afford. The major often confronted him, shouting, "Volkov, you are a soldier, first and foremost. What if the fascists invade this pigsty? Will you give them an aspirin?" Dimitri always remained calm, answering with his truth. "Major, I will be the last to leave, but my hands are reserved for staunching blood, not for spilling it." This tension was the psychological toll that accompanied him. He saved lives day and night, but with every life saved, he received judging looks. The major insisted he had a duty to protect the post, to ensure no secrets fell into enemy hands, stating that a weapon was a final obligation. Dimitri responded with the irritating calm of the morally convicted, reminding the major that the protocol of his oath was above combat tactics. This argument was a vicious cycle, interrupted only by the sound of artillery or the arrival of another mutilated body. The winter tightened its grip. The German offensive was failing, but the Soviet counteroffensive was relentless. The wounded arrived in droves, and on one particularly bleak night, a new patient changed everything. A Red Army soldier dragged in a covered body, and when the covering was removed, a Wehrmacht uniform was revealed. A deathly silence fell over the shelter. It was a German soldier, seriously wounded in the leg. According to orders, he should have been interrogated, not treated, but the leg was gangrenous. Time was crucial. Dimitri's moral dilemma reached its peak: the Hippocratic Oath versus loyalty to the motherland. The commander was out on a mission, and Dimitri was the only medical authority. Looking at the pale young face of the enemy, he saw only a dying man. This was the moment of his invisible sacrifice. The German's name was Klaus. He was 19, and Dimitri found a crumpled photo of a woman and a baby in his pocket. In that moment, he was not the enemy from the east. He was a son and a father, and he was dying of gangrene. Dimitri fixed his gaze on the youth, whispering his fundamental principle: "Your flag doesn't matter. You are my patient. My mission is with you now." Dimitri made his decision. He ignored the protests of the others. Klaus's treatment was complex and risky, requiring immediate amputation, with minimal supplies and non-existent hygiene conditions. It was an operation that demanded more courage than running into a minefield. It was the courage to defy collective hatred and military dogma. He saved Klaus's life, but in doing so, he became a pariah among his own men. The soldier who refused to kill a German now saved one. One of the Soviet soldiers confronted him angrily, yelling, "You cured him so he can go back and kill more of us? Traitor!" The war ended for Dimitri. He was no longer fighting the Germans. He was fighting the dehumanization of his own comrades. This is the essence of the moral dilemma. What is more important, the mission or humanity? He tried to reason with the sergeant in command, saying, "He is wounded. He is no longer a combatant, Sergeant. My priority is saving lives. If that were your brother there." The sergeant responded with the blind hatred of the battle. "My brother fights for Mother Russia. He doesn't attack children. A fascist deserves death, not our bandages." Fear and cold had turned men into ideologies. Klaus, under the effect of the crude morphine, murmured in German. Dimitri, who spoke a little, heard something that broke him. "Mother, I don't want to go back." It was the voice of lost innocence. The soldier who realized he was fighting on the wrong side. Dimitri saw his own reflection in the enemy. The psychological toll of surviving hits everyone, regardless of the uniform's color. Klaus, the enemy who became his brother in pain, was living proof that war was the story of the man who destroys everything for a flag. Major Krylov returned 2 days later, and the situation exploded. Major Krylov stormed into the shelter, his face red contrasting with the snow on his coat. His eyes locked onto Klaus's pale body. It was judgment time. The major roared, "Volkov, you have dishonored me. Is this your mission? To comfort the fascist enemy?" The order was clear, priority to interrogation. Dimitri replied with his usual firmness, "I fulfilled my oath, Major. He is no longer a combat threat. He is an invalid. The amputation saved him, but incapacitated him." The major, ignoring Dimitri's humanitarian logic, furiously ordered, "You don't understand war. An enemy is an enemy. Take him to the interrogation room, now." This order, Dimitri knew, meant the young man's slow death. Dimitri realized he had to act. It wasn't just about saving Klaus. It was about saving the last vestige of his own humanity. He raced through the rubble to save the one who hated him. In a high-risk decision, he sedated Klaus with his remaining drugs and, under the pretext of taking him for secret treatment at another post, dragged the German out of the shelter towards the frozen labyrinth of the ruined city. It was a suicide mission. Isolation behind enemy lines, with a wounded man in a violent blizzard. He had to deliver Klaus to the German front, just a few hundred meters away, and return before the major caught him. Dimitri ran. He became, for the first and last time, an agent infiltrated on the battlefield, carrying his secret, choosing humanity over ideology. Russian shots tore through the air, fired by soldiers who noticed the escape and were pursuing the two. They were aiming not at the German, but at the doctor. Dimitri, exhausted, managed to reach an abandoned German outpost. He left Klaus there, nestled in a hole, with the photo and a crude note in German that read, "Your side still needs you. Live. Do not return to this war." The sacrifice of his time, his position, his freedom, was total. He returned. He ran back, not because he feared the major, but because his mission was not finished. There were more wounded waiting in the shelter, but Major Krylov was waiting for him, ready for execution. The major stared at him, almost triumphant, and declared, "It's over, Volkov. Treason in time of war." Dimitri, exhausted but at peace with his conscience, replied, "I did not betray my homeland, Major. I betrayed your hatred." The accusation of treason was inevitable, but before Dimitri could be summarily executed, fate intervened. A German artillery attack, unexpected and violent, hit the shelter. The hell of ice turned into fire and rubble. Dimitri, the man who refused to kill, was trapped under the debris next to the major, who was seriously wounded. The war was over for Major Krylov, and ironically, the only person who could save him was the man he had just condemned. The psychological trauma of that moment forced Dimitri to make the final choice. It was no longer the motherland or the enemy. It was life. He used what was left of his medical kit to treat the major's wounds, ignoring his own pain. The major watched him, amidst the collapse, with a mixture of hatred, confusion, and a glimpse of gratitude. He saw the man who refused weapons save the man who condemned him. The two were rescued hours later by a search squad. The major survived, and his testimony, contradictory and confused, did not mention Klaus's escape, but described Dimitri's bravery and dedication under the attack. The legend of the doctor of Stalingrad, the man who ran through bullets but refused to shoot, began there. Dimitri was decorated, but released from active military service due to psychological instability. It was the government's way of dealing with a hero who didn't fit the protocol. He spent the rest of the war treating civilians in hospitals in the rear. He tried to rebuild his life, but the war ended, and he still heard the shots. The nightmares of Stalingrad haunted him forever, the true trauma of a veteran. And what happened to Klaus? The ending is a testament to redemption. Decades later, in 1993, a report from an NGO in Germany mentioned Dr. Klaus Richter, who had lost his leg in Stalingrad. A doctor who dedicated his life to helping war victims. The repentant enemy who sought forgiveness through healing, inspired by a Russian angel who saved him. They never met again, but their stories of courage and sacrifice became a silent testimony. This is the raw truth. In the end, no one won. The story of Stalingrad is the story of the man who, in the midst of chaos and destruction, chose humanity over the flag. Dimitri Volkov did not follow the combat protocol. He rewrote the protocol of the human soul. And he reminds us that the greatest weapon in a war is not the one that kills, but the one that heals. Dimitri's sacrifice was invisible to most, but for Klaus and for all who were touched by his dedication, he was a beacon of hope.